This is the A to Z podcast. I'm Anthony Zanni. I'm here with my guest, Jim Leyritz. Jim, thanks for being on, brother. I appreciate it.
No, good to be on. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. Of course. I want to start right away. Got to talk about the 1996 home run. We always got to talk about that.
There it is.
There it is with the picture in the background. I absolutely love it. I mean, that is my childhood right there. And I love thinking about that moment. It was one of the greatest moments I've ever seen. And can you take me through it? What were you thinking as you're stepping up to the plate? What are you thinking? What's going through your head?
Well, in that situation, first and third, one out. We're down 3 runs. I got a guy on the mound throwing 100 miles an hour. The only thing I'm doing is trying to look for a ball up in the zone that I can try to drive, either hit a sacrifice fly, get a run in, or drive the ball the opposite field. And again, not knowing the Atlanta Braves very well because we had never played them. We didn't play interleague back then.
Right.
And so all I knew was that Wohlers had a fastball at 100 miles an hour. And after watching him pitch to Mariano Duncan in front of me, know that he had a slider. I never knew this guy had a forkball. I never read the report. I never read anything. And so I just felt he was a fastball slider pitcher. And, thank God, because had I known, I might have been looking for that split.
Right. Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, and but what was even funnier was even before the at bat, after we got 3 outs in the bottom of the 7th, or I'm sorry, top of the 7th, when Paul O'Neill struck out and Tino Martinez struck out against Bilecki, I remember looking at Pat Kelly and he goes to me, "Did you see Wohlers warming up in the bullpen? We're done. Thank God we didn't get swept." And we had won game 3, so we figured, okay. But when we saw Wohlers warming up in the bullpen, he was there, Mariano Rivera.
Right.
We were like, we're done. We're down 3 runs with 2 innings to go, and this guy's coming in. We got no chance. But then, of course, the 8th inning starts off, and Charlie Hayes gets the swinging bunt.
Yep.
Strong gets the base hit, and then Mariano hits a routine double play ball to Rafael Belliard, who just came in for defense, and he only gets the 1 out at second base. All I could think about was coming up, going, okay, just let's get 1 run here,
sure,
and take another shot at the top of the 9th inning to get a few more. And thank God for me, 2-2 pitch, he hangs a slider, and I was able to get enough of it to hit the home run and tie the game up, and really just change the entire momentum of that game. And then, of course, we go to the 9th inning. We don't score, they don't score. We go to the 10th, and Wade Boggs gets the bases loaded walk to put us ahead. Charlie Hayes hits a ball to a foul ball, or a ball off his hands to the first baseman, Ryan Klesko. He loses it in the lights. We go up 10 or 8-6. And then, of course, we win in the bottom of the 10th inning. And that entire change, the momentum of that World Series shifted. We were able to win game 5 with Andy Pettit's great 1-0 game. And then, of course, go home and win game 6.
Speaking of Andy Pettitte, how was it catching for him? I mean, that had to be such an honor, the fact that he pretty much only wanted to pitch to you.
Yeah, 1995, when he was pitching to Mike Stanley, he was struggling because he didn't feel like Mike Stanley could frame his pitches and catch his cutter like I could. After catching him in his bullpens, he asked for me to catch him. And then, of course, we had a great game in the first game. And that's the most important thing, is that first game that you're with him, that you do well. And of course, we won our first game together. And the rest of that season, we went 9-3 together.
Wow.
And then, of course, with Buck Showalter being fired and Joe Torre coming on, there was a question whether Joe Torre would allow me to continue to be Andy Pettitte's personal catcher. And when Joe came aboard and Andy met with them and said, "Can Jimmy still be my catcher?" Joe said, "Absolutely, unless we're facing the Randy Johnsons, where I want to get Joe Girardi's bat in the lineup also because he's right-handed.
Right.
And we may have to make some switches." But fortunately for us, that only came up once that year. And I caught most of his starts in 96.
Was he the best pitcher, would you say, that you caught?
I would say he's the best relationship that I had with a pitcher who trusted me because he knew my background as a hitter. Joe Girardi was more catcher first, hitter second.
Right.
I was the opposite. I was hitter first, catcher second. And I was able to make him feel very confident that I knew what pitches to call against other hitters that he had confidence in throwing to me.
Makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. How was it playing with guys like Bernie, Jeter, Paul O'Neill, Tino Martinez? Like, is there anything you could tell me about those guys?
Well, Bernie was my teammate all through the minor leagues. We played together since rookie ball, all the way up to AAA. I got called up before he did, 2 years before he did. Um, but playing with him, knowing that he was going to be eventually there, when when first Hitchcock comes up, then Pettit comes up. We made the trade for Paul O'Neill in '92, Wade Boggs in '92.
Yeah.
Things just really started changing for us, and that giving G. Michael and Buck Showalter, giving the young kids a chance, kind of like what they're going through now.
Sure. Yeah.
Getting us a chance, and then of course, performing to keep that chance going. I was lucky enough by '96 to be the most tenured guy on that roster. And then, of course, just have those moments that we had getting to the playoffs in '95. And then, of course, winning the World Series in '96, changing the entire scope of what the Yankees were going to do, even in those late '90s.
Yeah. I mean, that started it off, man. It really
Yeah.
did. That was still my most fun year of watching Yankee baseball. I don't know if it's just the fact that I was 12 years old or what it was, but that season was very, very special. Very special. That group of guys, I just don't feel like we'll ever I don't feel like we'll ever see something like that again personally, but
Yeah, it's again, thank God for there was no sabermetrics back then.
yeah.
Because I always tell these guys, because I've been talking about coaching and going back to things, and being with the agency. We'll talk about the agency coming up, but
Yep.
Being with the agency, for me, sabermetrics is a great tool, but it's become too much part of the game that it's really taken away. I always use myself as a comparison. If you look at my numbers in September, you would have never played me in the postseason.
Right.
And can you imagine not only the Yankees not playing me in the postseason, but the Padres not playing me in the postseason?
Yeah.
What would have maybe changed the history of those two organizations?
Absolutely. It absolutely would have.
Yeah, would have changed everything. And I always tell people, and I'll tell the story about me and the Atlanta Braves. When I was in high school, I was supposed to be a #1 draft pick. I broke my leg 4 days before the draft.
Oof.
And the team that was scouting me and wanting to sign me was the Atlanta Braves. And when they came back to watch me play after I hurt my foot, we had a deal in place that I was going to sign with the Atlanta Braves. And my dad wanted $10,000. And they said, we can only give him 5. And my dad said, screw that. He's going to college. Those two scouts for the Braves were in John Sherholtz's box in 1996 in Atlanta Fulton County Stadium.
That is
when I hit that home run, and they tell the story that they both looked at each other and said, "Do not tell Sherholtz for $5,000. We could have changed this entire scenario. Jim Leyritz would have never been a New York Yankee." And you think about that history, it's pretty crazy to be a part of that.
That is, I didn't know that story. That is delicious. That is awesome. That makes it even better. I didn't know that was possible. That's amazing, man. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Getting back to, I want to talk about Derek Jeter for a second. So you were with him in '96. That's his rookie year. Did you see in him what he was going to become? Were you like, hey man, this guy's special? Like just the way he carries himself, he's going to be something special in New York?
Well, the first thing I was able to do, because him and I became friends after the season of '95, I had moved to Tampa because we were starting the spring training there. I had moved to Tampa. He was living in Tampa, working out at the complex. We were working out together every day in January, and just got a chance to, my wife would cook dinner for him because he was by himself. He'd come over to the house all the time with a couple guys, Brad Osmus and Tom Wilson and a couple other guys that were there that were living in Tampa. And we got to be pretty good friends. And you could see the work ethic from day one with Derek, that this guy was something different. And again, it was only January, and I kept telling him, Derek, we don't go to spring training until the end of February, dude. Relax. And he just said, no, this is part of my routine. This is how I get myself ready. And as a young kid at 18, 19 years old, with that type of work ethic, you knew he was going to be something different. And then, of course, if Tony Fernandez never breaks his hand, if Tony doesn't break his hand, we never see Derek Jeter in '96.
Yeah, you're right.
And just the way things work out sometimes in baseball, Tony breaks his hand 2 weeks before spring training ends. Derek gets that opportunity, and he never looks back.
Nice.
And I get traded after the '96 season. I'm gone in '97, '98. I get traded back in '97 or '99. And the first thing that I do is I want to see what Derek Jeter, who has now won Rookie of the Year, 2 World Series, and is becoming the captain of the Yankees. What is his work ethic like still? And man, Anthony, the day I got back, it was in Texas, 97 degrees and humid. I get to the ballpark at 2:00. Who was there already doing his routine, already doing the same thing that he did, was Derek Jeter. And it was great to see that all that stardom and all that success never went to his head. And that's why he had such a great 20-year run in New York.
Yeah.
He stayed single, which was smart. So he never had that trouble. But just like I said, just the work ethic that his parents had instilled in him, and to his credit, never wavered from that.
Yeah.
And that's why he was able to go on and have such a successful career.
It is amazing seeing him, even to this day. He's on television now, and I get to watch it. He still carries himself at a level that you're not used to seeing it. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but you just watch it, and I'm like, it's almost like he's not full of himself, obviously, but like he's super confident though. So it's not a cockiness, it's a confidence thing. It's just wonderful to see that somebody that reached that level of stardom is just so grounded.
Well, I think it's a great move by Fox, because once you bring on A-Rod, and of course him suing baseball, suing the Yankees, everything that he has done to why he wound up there, and then Big Papi with all of his issues, being shot because of certain situations that he was in, and then all of a sudden bringing some validity to their broadcast with Derek Jeter. I don't know if he'll be back next year. I hope he is, but it was interesting to see that dynamic duel of those 3 guys.
Oh, it's interesting.
Yeah. And I thought it worked pretty well.
I thought it made for some must-watch television, which I think is what they were going for. And there was times that I questioned if Derek was actually having fun doing what he's doing. But it made it, I'm a big fan of the show The Office. It made it like awkward. And it was like must see. I'm like, oh man, I gotta tune in and see what's gonna happen now.
Yes. And like I said, I think he brought a little bit more validity.
Sure, absolutely.
To that, because he was kind of the straight guy, bringing those guys back down a little bit, going, okay, guys, enough of the craziness. Let's talk about baseball.
Yeah, I agree. I wanted to talk about when scouting. Obviously, you do scouting now, which is incredible. What would you say to a kid that's looking to get their name out there? They're looking to get into a system, either get into a college, preferably D1 or a D2 college, or just looking to get scouted where maybe they could get drafted. What would you say you are looking for? What age are you looking to do it? Like when do you start scouting kids?
Well, that's the interesting thing, how times have changed also in that area. When the company is North Star Sports, and when they came and asked me to become part of that and become a recruiter on behalf of their agency, I was like, okay, let me learn what the rules are now. Because when I was growing up in high school and college, you couldn't speak to an agent.
Really?
You didn't have NILs and all these different types that were happening. If you spoke to an agent, you became ineligible in college. Now, again, you're not considered an agent, you're considered an advisor.
Right.
Until they get drafted and signed. But I'm finding out now that we're talking to kids in high school, sophomores, juniors, seniors, and then a bunch of, college kids. And back in the day, you couldn't do that. And so some of those things are the learning process that I'm going through. One of the things, we have the Scott Boris's, We have the big agencies that are out there that we compete with.
Yeah.
But they brought myself and they brought Dave Island also on board. Dave is kind of the director of operations. And then I'm one of the recruiters. One of the things that we're able to offer other, parents and the kids is like, hey, listen, we've been there. We're not just an agency representing your son. We're there if your son starts struggling.
Right.
If he's, because they're going to struggle in the minor leagues. They're going to struggle, in college and in areas that we've already done that and we've already been through it. We know how to give them a little bit more of more than just an agency, a little bit more mentoring to be able to get through the tougher times that they're going to go through. And baseball is one of the hard, Anthony, baseball is one of the hardest.
Absolutely.
It's not like the other sports that you get signed that you automatically go to the big leagues.
Right.
NFL, you're in the NFL. NBA, you're in the NBA once you get drafted. Now they have the D League, which is a little bit different, but in general, you're ready to go play at that big level.
Yeah.
Baseball is a little bit different. You're going to go through 2 or 3 years of minor leagues, no matter really how good you are, to be able to prove yourself. And so it's important for them to have representation, but also have the mentorship that our agency, North Star, is able to give them with Dave Island as a pitcher and with Jim Leyritz as a position player.
Yeah.
So for what we're looking for is I'm looking for a lot of kids like me, not necessarily, I never got drafted. I was kind of overlooked. I want to be able to go look at kids and see that what their talent level. Yes, sure. We love to have a number 1, number 2 draft pick, and we're hoping to get a few of those.
Of course.
But at the same time, we're going to look at those 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round kids that are like, okay, they're still developing. And what do I see? What does Dave Island see as their potential as they get bigger, stronger? Because I were talked off air before. I was 5'9", 165 pounds when I graduated high school.
Yeah.
We're going to have to be able to see that this kid has talent, but even more so, he has drive. He has ambition. You were talking about leadership skills.
Yeah.
At a young age, Derek Jeter showed those skills in 1996 and went on to become the captain of the Yankees. I want to look at kids in high school and college that are going, okay, you know what? I'm not overwhelmed by being a freshman or sophomore on the varsity. I was that kid. I was on the varsity as a sophomore. And my coach, high school coach, told people in interviews, if I didn't know him earlier, I probably would have brought him up as a freshman.
Yeah.
So those are the type of things that we're going to look for in kids. We're going to look for kids that are dedicated to work, to put in a time, to listen to their coaches, that work well with others, but also have some of those leadership skills at an early age that we're looking for. And when they do fail, because they're going to fail,
of course,
are they able to bounce back? Are they able to have the ability to have an 0 for 4 and come back, on a Tuesday and 0 for 4, come back on Friday and say, hey, I'm ready to go. Forget about what happened. Baseball is where we have to teach these kids to have a very short memory.
Absolutely. Because
as they progress, you go from high school 30 games to college 75 games to the pros, where minor leagues you're 140 and then 160. So it's a matter of being able to forget yesterday and move on to the next day.
Yeah, for sure. I think that another big thing in baseball, because like you said, you are playing so many games, it's the ability to stay healthy. So are you looking, when you're scouting these kids, are you looking at how well they're stretching? Are you looking at their flexibility and saying, hey man, you have the same talent as this guy, but this guy is actually flexible and you can't bend? Is that something that you guys take into account at all?
Yeah, my son works for a school out here that's a 6th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and 8th grade holdbacks. And it's kind of like an IMG academy for middle schoolers. And one of the greatest things that their organization teaches is not only you can come to the school as a one sport athlete, but what they do is they make them play basketball. They make them play football drills, go through these drills these other sports, because at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, even though maybe you want to concentrate on one sport, who knows what you might grow into.
Right.
You might be 5'6" in 6th grade, but you may be 6'2" by the time you're a freshman in high school. You never know what your growth pattern is going to be and whether or not. So it's really important for parents to realize that at 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, make sure your kid is a well-rounded athlete.
Sure.
Yes, you maybe want to concentrate in one sport, but make sure he's got a trainer that puts him through agility drills, through other sports drills, that if he pivots to basketball, if he pivots to baseball, if he pivots to football, his body is ready to make those adjustments. And I think that's the most important thing I tell parents right now is, okay, yes, it's a little bit different than my day when I was a 3-sport athlete.
Yeah.
But at the same time, your training regime you can be taught, and your body can be able to pivot in different sports if you train the right way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was actually just having this conversation yesterday. I don't feel like there's leagues that kids could just be kids nowadays. Like every
Right.
league you're paying a lot of money for the league, and it's a very serious league from the time that they're basically 7 years old on. And I feel like long gone are those, like, rec leagues that you just kind of join and throw your kid in. You're like, all right, have fun. I'll see you in an hour, 2 hours, whatever the case is. Now it's all very, very serious. They have a lot of trainers, and you got to start them young and early and get them going. And like you said, whatever sport they choose to do.
When I live out here in California, where kind of the trend over the last couple of years has been, okay, the high school team's great, but the travel team, the perfect games, all these travel teams are more important than your high school team, which is kind of sad, because most of these kids want to do something in high school with their friends,
Yeah.
especially if they're not the ones that are going to be going on to play college or going on to play pros. But for me, like I said, I always tell these kids, high school first, education, get your grades, because if you're not a number 1 pick out of high school, which 92% of the people aren't going to be,
Right.
all right, you're going to have to go to college, and you know what, you're going to have to get the grades, and you're going to be able to get into good schools. We talked earlier about, what about D1, D2, junior college? I was a junior college guy because, again, as I mentioned earlier, I broke my foot before the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to be a draft pick. So I wanted to go to a junior college so I could be picked my freshman year, my sophomore year, if I was playing good enough, if I was healthy enough. I didn't want to go to a 4-year school where I had to wait 3 years to be drafted.
Yeah.
And I think that's, now it's a little bit different. You can sign after 2 years, depending on your age. But for me back then, so I always tell these kids, if you think you're ready for the draft, junior college might be your better route. They have a lot of great junior colleges out there.
Yeah.
In Florida, California. If not, if you're my son was 6'3", but 160 pounds. And I wanted him to go to college. And I said, go to a 3 years or a 4-year school, because in 3 years, you'll be 6'3", 190, 200, and you'll be ready to play. He tried to do it right out of high school, and he got beat up, and he was not ready. So I tell kids, look at what your body type is, look at your growth. We all want to go out of high school and get, all the big money. But the bottom line is our body physically ready? And so if you're not the Bryce Harpers and those guys that were as big as they were as freshmen,
Right,
and sophomores in high school, give yourself some time. But if you're that kid that has the ability, that is pretty big as a freshman or sophomore in high school, and you want to go to you want to go to a 4-year school to develop, then you know what? Then you choose that. But again, Division I, Division II, I always say, as long as you get there, because if you go to a Division I school as a freshman and sophomore, got to remember there's a junior and senior trying to get drafted too. And those guys have been there for 2 years already, and they've paid their dues. And unless you're the phenom, the A-Rods, the Derek Jeters, then you know what? You're probably going to sit your first 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and learn as you're progressing.
Yeah.
So do you want to do that? You might be better off going to a D2 or a junior college where you're going to play your first year. So those are all things that I try to tell parents. Yes, everybody wants D1. Everybody wants to play for LSU and for Florida State, for the big schools. But you know what? Sometimes the smaller schools is a better route for your son.
Absolutely. I completely agree to that. I try to explain that to some of the guys now. I mean, the guys that I'm coaching are, 15, 16. So they're not quite looking at their schools yet. It's really the next year that they kind of look at what colleges to go to. But I say the same things. I mean, everybody, like you said, wants to go to D1. You need to be prepared to most likely sit at least 1 year, if not 2 years, because you're right. There's a bunch of guys in front of them that were waiting their turn. And unless you're a phenom, you're probably not going to get that shot.
Well, and like we were speaking about with the agency with North Star that I'm working for, that is kind of what my job is, and Dave Island's job is to talk to these parents and these kids and say, hey, listen, this is what we think about your son. I think that is one advantage that these kids have nowadays is you're allowed to have an advisor at an early age. So you can have people like me and Dave that say, hey, yes, this is how good you are. This is what we see. And this might be a better path for you. And, to be able to have that kind of advising from players that have been there, not just an agent, but a player who has played, that's where our agency really has a huge advantage over some of the bigger agencies that don't have the former players. Being able to talk to these kids. And that's kind of really what my job is saying, hey, you're a freshman, you're a sophomore. I can talk to you and give you some advice. And maybe you can see the path and see your path a little bit better and not be so anxious,
right,
and kind of trust in the process and be patient. Because like you just said, most parents are like, I want my kid to be a number 1 draft pick. And I'm like, okay. But you saw my career and I never got drafted.
Yeah.
So maybe there are some other routes that, hey, I can help you, and let's be a little more patient, so that's, like I said, that's the mentorship that our organization is able to give some of these kids.
Yeah, I would highly recommend you guys. I mean, you and Dave have to be a very formidable team. I think that's incredible what you're able to give, just in the fact that you were ball players. You were both major league ball players. You both made it to the as far as you can go, and you can kind of guide them every step of the way. So, I mean, I think you're going to do great in this career, Jim. You know that.
Thank you.
Is there any stories that come to the top of your mind on like Bernie or Paul O'Neill or Mariano or Tino? Any funny stories that you can think of that you're able to share, I should say?
The first one I always share with people is Wade Boggs.
I love Boggs.
And just how the media sometimes totally gets it wrong, and just how when a guy leaves a team that necessarily don't believe everything that they say, because they're mad that he's leaving. I remember when Wade came to our team in '92. Not only did he take my jersey number because he wanted number 12, all right, but he came there with, he's a selfish player. He's all about Wade Boggs. He doesn't fit in with the team, this and that. And he's pretty much done, that type of thing. And when he comes over and you meet him and you realize, man, this guy is a great guy. He fit in perfectly. He became our kangaroo court judge.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, he had to put the wig on the whole thing. and he really brought the clubhouse together. And this was a complete opposite of what the Boston media and the Boston Red Sox were telling us about Wade Boggs. So I always tell people, don't ever believe what the media and what everybody says, because most of the time it's not right. And then again, Paul O'Neill, he comes over to us. And he had a run-in with Lou Piniella and Champ Summers, the batting coach, because they were like, oh, he's not a team guy. He didn't want to just start hitting home runs. He could have hit 30 home runs a year, but he wanted to hit 300. And, he comes over to the Yankees and he becomes the warrior, And so it's just funny sometimes how until you get to know somebody,
Sure.
till you get to meet that person, you learn about their persona through the media, but you never learn about their character until you play with them. You know, and so those are some great stories. Deion Sanders, I just did a whole story on Deion because we played together in the minor leagues and the major leagues. And of course, what he's doing in Colorado,
Yeah.
with all this stuff, they were asking me, what was he like? And I said, well, listen, there was prime time and there was Deion. And as his teammate in the minor leagues and the major leagues, I got to see Deion. I got to learn about his character, his Bible preaching, his talking about what God had done for his life and everything else. But as soon as I went out in public with Deion, he became prime time. All right. That persona came out, and that's how he sold it to the public.
Yeah.
And when the guy was interviewing me, he goes, you mean he wasn't that way 24/7? I go, no. Deion Sanders, the private guy, was a great guy, great father, great inspirational leader. And what he's doing for these kids now in college, that's what you want for your kids. And so it was fun. It was fun to be able to talk about him and what he's doing now. But yeah, so many different stories. I mean, the one great thing about the Yankees and growing and playing in the early 90s, Anthony, is we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have social media.
Yeah.
You didn't have all this stuff going on that you were able to be a little bit more private and really get to know the player, the person so much more because they didn't have to worry about all the other things that were going on socially.
Absolutely. I think that's a really fair point. To much so that would you recommend to kids, would you recommend that they don't go on social media or that they're just extremely careful when they're on there?
Yeah, I mean, you and I do podcasts, we do TV, radio interviews. It's important for us to have a social media following and people like that follow us. So we do have to kind of use it. But one of the things I learned when I made a mistake back in 2018, when I made a completely joking comment about Randy Levine and some of the people that when I didn't get invited to Old Timers Day, how it backfired and cost me $50,000 worth of Yankee work because I thought it was a funny joke. It turned into this complete disaster media, problem. I tell these kids all the time, I learned my lesson there that I'm going to use my social media to do beneficial, positive things, not my frat party, my sorority parties,
Right.
where I'm getting caught with I might be standing behind somebody with a beer or, and I'm caught on camera. I had to learn to use my social media to promote charities, foundation work that I was doing. Like you said, making appearances, doing my speaking engagements where I'm talking to college kids, and I'm doing all these, these positive things, not using it to go after somebody, to embarrass somebody, to try to use it to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
That's the point when I'm out now talking to kids, saying use your social media to promote positive things, not negative things.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point to make. Jim, last two things before I let you go. The current state of the New York Yankees and the current state of the San Diego Padres. Where do you see them going into the 2024 season? What are you thinking about both of them?
Well, listen, I thought for sure that when everything happened, when the Yankees came out and talked about being too sabermetric and that they were going to go back to back to the way they used to do things a little bit more. I am still waiting to find out who is going to be on that coaching staff that has big league experience, but also experience of playing in New York and knowing what the pressures are. When I heard them come out and talk about there's not one Yankee minor league coach that has major league experience, much less playing for the New York Yankees, you can see why things are falling apart. You can see why some of these kids come up and they're not ready. I had people like Clete Boyer, Hoyt Wilhelm, Frank Howard, guys like that in the minor leagues that got me ready to know what kind of pressure and what it was going to be like to play in New York and what it took to get there. That helped me be able to deal with all of the pressures of New York.
Yeah.
The last 7 years of this organization, there hasn't been one coach in that dugout that had that experience. And I'm hoping that they get back to that a little bit more. And I think that's going to help. And I echo the same thing with the Padres, that they got to get back to a little bit more of players who have played in San Diego, players who have been a part of the winning teams that have had success there, so they can mentor some of these kids on what it not. They have the talent, they have the ability, they just have to have it translate to the field.
Yeah.
And translating it to the field is not sabermetrics. You look what happened with Bruce Bochy this year. He took over a Texas team that didn't change personnel very much, somewhat, but not much.
Mm-hmm.
He said to them when he took over, I don't want a sabermetric person in my dugout. From 7 o'clock on, these guys are mine, and I am going to go with what I want to do. And if you saw what happened during that season and that postseason, you saw Bruce Bochy making baseball moves, not sabermetric moves.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what the game is going to start getting back to. And I think we're going to see a lot more former players who have been part of winning teams start coaching and being part of those teams.
I couldn't agree more with you. I thought what Bruce Bochy did, was truly amazing. I mean, this was a wonderful season for Texas. It was literally outside of September. I think they hit a little lull. I think it was in September or late August that they hit a little lull, but then they picked it up again as they got into the playoffs. But outside of those few weeks, they were almost unstoppable all year. It was wonderful to see. It was a really fun team to watch, really great offense. I felt bad for DeGrom, obviously, only 6 starts in a year and he got hurt. But could you imagine how good they would have been with him starting for them? Like, my Lord.
And that's just it. You know, and what Dusty Baker did with Houston over the last 5 years. I mean, it's some of these old school guys, you know, the Angels just hired Washington, Ron Washington. You know, he's 72 years old. Okay, maybe it's getting, you know, when Joe Madden got fired from the Angels, the first thing he said is, I am the creator of sabermetrics. It started with me back in 1997 when I was playing with Joe Madden. He said, I'm kind of the creator, and it's gotten to the point where I couldn't even manage with the Angels because it was too much.
Yeah.
Now maybe they're going to get back to with Ron Washington to a little bit more. Yeah, sabermetrics are a good tool to have, but I got to be a baseball guy too.
Absolutely.
And I got to make these guys become baseball people, not just robots. Going by statistics. So
couldn't agree more, man. Derek Jeter, there's been a lot of rumbling about Jeter potentially either managing the Yankees or being the GM for the Yankees. I don't foresee it happening within the next few years, but what do you think about that? Do you think he would wind up being a good GM or a good manager?
You know what? I don't think he's going to go on the field. I don't see him with 4 children wanting to be on the road, you know, 190 days out of the year. I do see the possibility that, you know, he did work in the Marlins front office. Whether we consider him successful or not, his hands were kind of tied there. They didn't want to do things that he wanted to do. And obviously that's why they parted ways. I see it as a good PR move by the Yankees that says Cashman goes up to becoming assistant to Randy Levine and the president.
Right.
And you bring in Jeter as your GM and you let him kind of start bringing in coaches and things like that. I could see that being a way to gain your fan base back to, hey, we're actually doing something, and, you know, bringing back some old winning ways to our organization, because that's really what George Steinbrenner built the Yankees on.
Yes.
And I know Cash does not want to be tied to the George Steinbrenner days. He wants this to be the Brian Cashman era, which is fair, really fair. But the bottom line is some of those old-fashioned ways are the reason we won and the reason it worked. And hopefully they'll get back to some of those.
Thank you so much, Jim, for being on. This is the A to Z podcast. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.